Jonathan, do we have anyone signed up for public comment? Jake. Okay. Is there anyone here who would like to speak during public comment? No one. Okay, then we will keep right on moving. All right, we'll take a look at our October 7th meeting minutes. Are there any corrections or additions, edits? If not, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Meeting minutes are approved. And we'll move into our first presentation, which is our 2025 Housing Needs Assessment with Jacob from Atlantic Sky Regional Council. It's good to see you, Jacob.
Great to see you guys here, and thank you for having me. I guess, is this on? Can everyone hear me well? Perfect, thank you. Appreciate you guys gathering here today to talk about this pivotal document. I wanted to ask first, before I even kind of went into it, has anybody reviewed it on the panel here? It's a pretty comprehensive document. I know it's a little over 500 pages here, and I'm going to do my best to present an authority. I think Patrick Bone would give me enough credit and grace to do it that I don't miss any key findings here. But I'm glad you guys took the opportunity to take a look at that document. It helped shape a lot for our comp plan and shows a lot of striking things that I'm sure a lot of us were already aware of, but we can take more into consideration, have some evidence to back that up. I hope I'm wrong with it. So the study overview, it covers all the counties in the Land of Sky region, but also most importantly for us is the home funding. Our consortium covered a lot of that and also made the city of Asheville its own separate unique category, along with the other county data that's available on there. This was a study that was updated from the 2020 study, and that 2020 study was a further update of what occurred in 2015. So this has been a nice sort of reflection of how we've done the past decade or so since it's really becoming a crisis for us in affordability. This was conducted right after the aftermath of Helene. I was told when I jumped on here, Atlantic Sky was in April, but they wanted to start that study a little earlier, but Helene had done a lot of impact, and as you all well know. So it kind of delayed the study, but we were able to still get a lot of good information within that sort of 6-month time period to give us a broad overview of what's going on in our area. This data uses census data, Esri, of course, American Community Survey data, and a huge part of that, we wouldn't say huge, but a big component of that is also getting stakeholder feedback. And some of you may even actually took that survey as part of the study session. And that provided a lot of good impact of the stakeholders in our region, what they're doing and what they consider our biggest barriers. And I'll go into more of that later. Key demographics from that, back on that. Key demographics from that is we're roughly at about 500,000 people in our population. Projected to the next census, we're expected to exceed that amount and get over to 500,000 officially. Median household income for our area is below the state average of about 74,000, but we can often kind of expect at 67. A lot of that wealth is concentrated in Buncombe and of course in Henderson, and Madison and Transylvania as outliers there. What we are expected to do aside from the population growth occurring to that is also household growth, which we'll see later on that even though we're expecting almost 7,000 more households to join our area, that's going to greatly exacerbate the household shortage that we already have. With that population, we're split roughly about 1/3 of the population is renting. Another 2/3 are actually split into owning homes. But biggest takeaways from that survey is the housing market in Asheville is characterized by a housing shortage that helps increase costs, which makes an affordability challenge. And along with that, that's a general problem from everyone. But when we have those three things of a housing shortage with rising costs and affordability, that makes it more difficult for the special needs populations that we have in our area. And a huge target of that is also the elderly, but we'll get more into that later as well. So with the first one, we have a housing shortage. Not obvious to everyone here that we have over 34,000 units that are going to be needed by 2029. Projected about 14,000 rental units and a little over 20,000 for sale units are going to be needed by 2029. And we are in no way going to come close to that data, even for at least that number to at least shrink that gap. Now, one of the indicators by that is that we have a low rental rate. And some of you may have seen the news story on WLOS. I kind of clicked it there. If you guys have access to these slides, feel free to check out that story. I kind of think, this is my own personal opinion on that it's skewed to kind of just makes Helene a bigger scapegoat on saying these rental vacancy rates are low. And there might be some effect to that they've actually increased. We have a higher vacancy rate of about 10% is what the story said. But when Bowen conducted this survey, we were looking at about 3 to 4%, and a healthy market's got about 7%. With that vacancy rate, though, I think it's more tied to being unable to afford units. And I think more people are actually kind of commingling together, getting more roommates, and not going into these units that are marketed as higher end. Because what we do have a lot of in this area are mansions. You have over $1 million home, you want to buy, plenty to choose from. Biltmore Estate, huge one we can get, but not on the market. But that seems to be what we market to the areas is more luxury and units that are sitting vacant, adding to that sort of increase of, or I guess, higher vacancy rate now. We have a high demand for a government wait list, and almost all the government subsidized units that we have are near full capacity with no vacancy at all.
Okay.
Yeah,
I was going to ask you to repeat what the WLS story
Mhm.
implies, what your personal opinions are
yeah, sure.
versus what the vacancy rate should be in an optimal scenario.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you
So
repeat that for us?
optimal vacancy rate for our area in a healthy market is 7%. That's what you're looking at. So you got nice churn and flow of people coming in, coming out. Now, when the study was done, vacancy rates were about 3 to 4%, which indicated that we were strained and that we were filling up units and maybe not optimally. Now, what the WLS story says here is we're at roughly about 10% vacancy rate. And what that story suggested is a lot of that is attributable to Helene. And I don't think that's quite accurate. I think it's more of we have a glut of premium luxury apartments that they sort of indicated where the single bedroom rent is like 1,400, a little over, I think it's close to 1,500 there. And just people aren't interested in that or not necessarily can't afford to get that sort of unit. So these apartments are just sitting vacant, adding to a higher rate.
So it's not that you're thinking the 10% number is wrong. It's the why.
Yeah,
that number might be.
I would attribute to that. Yeah, and I don't think it's necessarily like said Helene. I think it's more just constraint from Helene, if anything, just economic factors more than actual people moving out of our area. Because I think even with that, I don't think too many people are turned away because of Helene. I mean, it's of course tragic, and we might have lost some population, but I don't think we're losing droves of people due to that.
Can I ask a question? And if you're going to get to this later,
Yeah,
we can put this on the parking lot for a second. But with the 34,000 units needed by 2029, is there a breakdown of how much of that is due to new folks moving into the county and how much of that is existing housing stock that's just fallen into disrepair or lost due to Helene?
I think more of that is just a gap of units that even before Helene that we just didn't have. We'd make it to where we could have level costs that kept up with wages and kept up with the demand for housing we're seeing. But I think most of that is stock that we just didn't have to begin with, even prior to Helene, prior to COVID, even where they're just getting exacerbated. And population increase is not helping that situation. But I think even if we weren't seeing that increase of people, the study still shows that we need that housing.
Ask you a question about, in the county, we have a significant amount of trailers that operate as, I guess, de facto affordable rental housing. Are those characterized in any way in the county?
Now, in this study, we didn't necessarily differentiate from manufactured homes. Now, I know that is a great affordable housing unit, and a lot of those are seeing replacements because of Helene. They took out a lot of the homes that weren't sort of anchored down properly. That was like the biggest sort of unit we saw that got displaced was these manufactured homes. Now, I don't know if there's anything in the study that differentiates that further, but I hope that answers your question.
It does.
Were there any others? The best I can get with. Now, as I said earlier, with the sort of housing gap that we created here, it's considered rising cost on every sort of unit, manufactured homes included. They've risen dramatically since 2020. Median list price ranges from 49, almost, I guess you'd say roughly $500,000 there in Madison County, and to what the highest end of our median home prices of $675,000 is actually surprisingly in Transylvania County. Median rents for the market rate units are exceeding about $1,800 for a 2-bedroom unit, and as you can see, we've gone almost $365 as the sort of median price for 2021, up to roughly $453,000 in 2024. Now, I know a lot of us in here are professionals, but I don't think any of us have gotten a raise of over $100,000 in a 4-year span. Definitely not keeping up with what we got. Now, with that, as I said, is affordability challenges. Based on the data that we've accumulated, there's roughly 50% of our renters are cost burdened. There's further numbers that says about 10 to 20% are severely cost burdened, which means 50% of their income is going to housing. But to have our renters at almost 50%, showing that over 30% of their income is going towards housing, and the same It's not necessarily as dramatic for homeowners. We've got about 20% that are cost burden, a little under that. I think it's a little under 10% that are severely cost burden there. And as I alluded to earlier, the planned development, we've got almost 4,000 units, multifamily units across all the area that are planned for development, and 434 sale homes pending sort of permits and build and COs. But a lot of that targets higher end premium homes that are leaving a significant gap for the lower middle class income or residents in our area. With this next slide, this was great information from the study that showed what it would cost, what sort of income you need to have to rent in our area, which is not too bad when we think of 60,000. That's still under the median of what we have, about 67,000. Transylvania is great and kind of showing 46,000 despite having higher home costs. But in order to purchase a home without being cost burdened, these are the incomes you need for our separate areas listed out here, well over 150,000 for most of our area. What I thought was striking more from the study is this sort of graphic here. I don't know if you guys can see, it's kind of squished, but those are our most popular industries in our area. And according to that, these professions, nobody can buy a home in our area. The ones in the black are the ones that can't afford something, and that's to rent. None of these professions, many of them will have on a single income, cannot afford to live here in our area. It's good to see that, again, Transylvania was able to supplant a lot, and you can get a lot more rentals there from professions, but most of the people, working people in our area, cannot afford to live here.
So a quick question on, well, first of all, it's a gut punch to see so many folks in our community that serve others in our community that can't afford to live here. But the slide before that, with Transylvania County having such a high home purchase price, yet a much lower income for rent, is that due to just the availability of apartments, or can you help explain that? Is there a
I wish
reason?
I had a way to explain that, because it kind of was odd to me. I was shocked to even see that as a higher median household as well. But I don't think there's any good explanation that I have, or even in the study, that suggests why rents are lower there, but home prices are much higher. I know it's a lot of that market is driven by second homes like Lake Toxaway and East Brevard, but
Yeah.
I don't have a good answer of why it's rent's more affordable, but the home prices are higher. It's kind of, maybe it's, if anything, the rent keeping up, sort of sagging behind these prices, and maybe that'll creep towards and sort of level out. The market might do that later on, but I don't have a good answer.
Could be competition, possibly, fewer folks trying to get into those rental units.
Yeah, that makes sense too.
I don't know.
It's all plausible.
Yeah, thank you.
And with that, so that sort of shows our whole area of what we need. I mean, that's all residents that are impacted by that. But when all housing is sort of impacting everyone, it makes it more difficult for special needs populations. We have more of a higher need for the elderly. A lot of our areas, particularly in Henderson County, over 25% of the households are considered above 65 or plus or older homes. And that makes it hard to provide any additional needs as far as like assisted living goes, nursing homes, things of that nature. With that projected need, there's about 7,700 homes or senior care beds that are going to be needed by 2029. And that's not in addition to the 34,000 home shortage we already have. These are just specifically targeted towards seniors. Part of the housing needs assessment was a stakeholder survey that I alluded to earlier. There's about 48 respondents, and this covered the whole geographic of 4 counties, and plus the city of Asheville came from diverse area backgrounds, where there's nonprofits, financial institutions, local government employees. And the biggest affordability issues they saw was for rent, home purchases are a huge barrier. With that was the cost of land and the availability of land seem to be the biggest issues that we have, according to these people that are in the industry. Of that, people who responded to the survey, they thought the best assistance we could provide is doing down payment assistance or home repair assistance. So kind of preserving the stock that we already had and making it available for people to purchase a home with down payment assistance. Renter assistance priorities, the biggest one there was sort of like down payment and just doing renter security deposit assistance. And even legal aid seemed to be a high priority amongst the stakeholders. But the consensus amongst them all was to rehab what we have and build. According to those survey results, these are the highest priorities, is to preserve what we have and start to build, no matter what it was, whether it's mixed family or single family. We need to preserve what we have and build onto our existing stock. Now, some of the recommendations from the study, we are kind of already in the mix of and doing a lot of. Bowen said that he likes to point to Asheville as sort of a poster child when he's going to other nations, and I was kind of shocked to hear that. But it's kind of makes us appreciate what we do have. We already have sort of nice housing committees such as this. We have programs with our SHODOs to work out, and we're doing what we can to sort of market Asheville as a place to developers that we are making it friendlier. Henderson, the city of Hendersonville just passed some more permit-friendly options for accessory dwellings, making it a lot easier to sort of do infill development. And I think that's going to be a lot of what we're going to see further down the road is how we can not necessarily target larger developers, but how we can do small-scale incremental development, and empower these sort of smaller developments local in our area instead of targeting more DR Hortons and things like that, which do help add to the stock. But I think a solution is going to be empowering the people that we have here to sort of take advantage of doing accessory dwellings or doing what we can to add duplexes, triplexes, quads, and sort of find that. Now, if you guys got the slides, feel free to check out the housing needs assessment there. The link's available on the City of Asheville's website, on my contact information there as well. And I'm happy to answer any other questions you guys have.
Thank you, Jacob.
Thank you.
Anyone have additional questions?
I think my last one is around that two previous slides, the rehab and build slide. It's kind of getting at what we need by construction type. And I guess this is more specific than I remember the Bowen report data being. But I've started to wonder, like, okay, we need X number of rental units to kind of fit the demand. What are the types of housing products that either can or should meet that demand? I think is what people on this committee eventually need to understand. We've been trying with the tools we have and doing our best, leveraging my tech and building multifamily housing. But what is the full menu of not just construction types, but housing product types that actually get built in the market, that could get built in the market?
I think one that's really striking, that's really popular, is along with manufactured housing, is sort of park model homes. There's one that's hard to make that differentiation. There's a company down in Fletcher that's called Compact Cottages, and they have origami homes that have become really popular, and they're actually sending them out to Durham and other areas. And it's similar to a modular construction in that it's open frame, they're ready to go. You can kind of place them on the ground, but it's not quite a full manufactured house that's got that HUD label on it that's been certified and inspected for that. And I think that's going to be the solution, is sort of more homes that aren't necessarily the park model type, but aren't necessarily complete manufactured homes already completed in the facility. I think that's what that company's at least doing is a good job of finding that middle ground and not necessarily finding a loophole in our building codes, but taking advantage of it where they can get a home up and permitted within 7 days as long as the inspection staff are cooperative. Now, that's not necessarily taking off, but I think that's a very promising solution for our area, is those homes that come sort of prefab like that, but can still follow the guidelines of not being an RV and still being considered single family dwelling. Manufactured housing, I think, is going to be a critical aspect of that too. Still doing single wide, double wide, just because they're complete, ready to go, and time is money, and those can get set up real quick. I think the big thing with that is the stigma that's associated with that, and the fact that you can't get single wides in a lot of areas. There seems to be a hesitancy towards that, even though construction standards have been increased on those, and they are just as reliable as some stick-built homes. But I think it's going to take a mix. There's going to be multiple levers, whether that's, doing zoning reform to allow more things like that, enhancing the building codes to have more leverage in allowing like triplexes and quadplexes without such harsh fire standards. That seems to be the delay of those, where you have to have firewalls, and considering like almost commercial standards and sprinkler systems in some of those to sort of provide that missing middle of what we need.
Do you think on the when I think of what's not getting built, I think of duplexes and quadruplexes.
Absolutely.
So the barrier to that is just fire standards, or do you think is there something else we're missing? I'm missing?
I think that's a huge barrier to it, is the willingness of having that sort of commercial threshold when it comes to building codes. Once you get to that third, now there was a big move in the state to sort of decrease those standards, and I don't know where they're at on that. Like Duplex is fine. That seems to be the magic number. We're still residential, but I know a lot of developers have said, and even here in Buncombe County with that, once you get to 3 or 4, that's when you have increased standards that are hard to meet.
So it's I guess with that product type, like you don't think it's the lack of subsidy. So there's no subsidy program that I know of that's ever helped in this area construct quadruplexes, for example. But it's not necessarily that lack of subsidy. It's actually code.
Yeah, I think
Regulatory
that's
problem.
probably the biggest prohibitive factor.
And then
That
the
is
market might actually start.
because I think the biggest thing too is what you get from capital investment is a higher return on either doing single family or large multifamily. 8+ is what you're going to get. It's these capital firms that sort of back what LIHTC can't cover. What you can't get from your own sort of private loans is these capital corporations like DR. And I don't mean to give them a bad name, and I think they're doing exactly what they need to. They're still adding stock, but it seems to be like there's no sort of common middle ground of either getting a higher return on doing single family homes that are, roughly close to 300, 400,000, you're going to get a higher return on that, or doing like a larger multifamily 8+ units. Seems to be where you get that sort of sweet spot on a return on investment. I don't necessarily think it's greed either. It just seems to be those are the options that we have. It's either single family or you go in like multifamily.
Yeah.
My question is more, has to go to site selection and what kind of sites do we identify? What kind of sites does the development community identify? Or what kind of sites are like out there for example, MHO has done a lot of infill development in little pockets, but then they're also doing Star Point, which is a standalone building sitting in the middle of a parking lot. And how do we do? Does a county own those sites? How do we direct the development community to the appropriate sites that we want for affordable housing, even if they're not publicly owned?
I think that's a challenging question in that it's the land that we do have available. If it's not city owned, it's like harsh, steep climates that are unable to kind of get built. It's available. And I think with the land that's good for great residents that's near amenities is sort of zoning restricted to commercial properties, I think is where a big barrier is. I wish I had a better answer of how to market it more appropriately, but that's the big issue we have here is land cost, and the available land that is there is like on the side of a mountain and floodplain. Now we see a lot of that available, but it's hard to market sort of downtown areas that are close to amenities that also fall into restrictions or don't be zoning prohibited. I guess it's not the right word for it, because there's a property right behind Trader Joe's right now that's being developed, and that's going to be duplex or a quad. I can't remember on the top of my head. But the thing is, the developer there was talking about how you would be okay to build like a 10,000 square foot home, no problem at all. But God forbid that he tried to build 400 square foot units there was a problem based on their permitting. And that's right there next to grocery stores and everything. But based on those codes that they have, didn't have the option to do 4 separate units like they wanted to do. So they're going to combine it into one to make it, I don't know if it's going to be more cost prohibitive for him, but it seemed like that was a challenge when he just wanted to do the smaller units and had to go for the sort of quad issue that they're going to do now.
Okay, yeah, because we have some commercially zoned properties that are really underutilized, like the Asheville Mall and the piece up here on Tunnel Road that are privately owned. Could have a
I think that's definitely a mix is of loosening zoning restrictions so you can have more mixed use properties, because I think that's the way to do it. It's more walkability. You're not straining systems. I think that's hopefully something we can see in the future.
Jacob, give us an example, maybe a couple examples of a commercial area, corridor, roadway that you were saying was too restrictive in terms of land use type or zoning type.
So that's the one that comes to mind is just Asheville really seems to be
Yeah.
a big target on that. And
Okay.
Buncombe County doesn't seem to be too bad on that end of it, because I see a
it's
lot of it,
okay.
because a lot of it what happens. I mean, a lot of it what happens with the corridors in Buncombe County, they're owned by Asheville. It's such a unique gerrymandering where you get all the way down in Airport Road. Even the city's right here, you're 20 minutes away, but that's still Asheville property. Same with like Long Shoals, and that whole area on like Hendersonville 25. I mean, those are great corridors, but I think the city owns a lot of that where it makes it really prohibitive to do anything, especially with Buncombe County City.
So the last question I have, so there's a couple recommendations that really jump out at me. Are develop a centralized housing resource center, and then enhance and leverage existing housing incentives to encourage preservation of existing housing and development of new residential units. And so Asheville is a poster child in some negative senses, but are there any municipalities or counties around the state that we could borrow some ideas from? Who's doing this really well that we may want to look towards to borrow some of their ideas?
Durham seems to be the one that would be comparable here to Asheville as well. Durham, is roughly about the same size as Buncombe County population wise. They just did what's it's Durham's EHC, which is like extra housing. God, I can't think of the last word for it, but they have essentially stagnated the prices of their home ever since they've done this sort of revisit of their codes, and it's made it where they've allowed more infill development. Seems to be the way to do it. They made it a lot easier to add these mother-in-law suites, reduce lot size, reduce parking minimums, and they've been able to curb the price of their homes dramatically, or I didn't say dramatically, but at least it's stagnated, and they've experienced just as much growth, if not more so.
Great, thank you.
And it's good. Hendersonville just did a really good job too of rewriting their code. They had a lot of low-hanging fruit by reducing setbacks and things like that. But that's something to consider as well.
Okay, and then the centralized housing resource center, is there one that comes to mind we want to look at?
There's one that I like to frequent a lot, and it's not necessarily a local one, but it's actually from New York University, the Furman University. They have a housing solutions lab, and it's really great information on there. They do like webinars monthly as well too, and they actually will come to communities and sort of guide them. And as well as there's this thing called a Strong Towns movement too. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. They have a whole complete housing ready kit to make sure that you can pull a permit and build a house like the day of. Now, I think that's something that Buncombe County does slack, because you can pull a permit to build a home. It's permitted by right, but that permit process takes a week to get approval. So that's something that could be improved.
Thank you.
Jacob, what role do you see Land of Sky Regional Council as our council on government playing in some of these recommendations? Specifically, as I think about some of these centralized centers, because you all are that council, has that been discussed?
It's something that I have tried to push more coming forth. There's one thing that's on the table for us is actually like a housing trust to create this sort of incentivize and add more developers by filling that gap that LIHTC or any other sort of grants aren't filling. Now, I don't know where that money is going to come from. I think we're all kind of strapped for it now, but I think Land of Sky needs to play a more pivotal role in networking and creating these sort of collaborations with the existing resources that we already have. Now, we do a good job, I'd say, with like the Alliance, sort of bringing nonprofits, financial institutions, and local government to the table. But I don't think there's nothing that I would say that is making the impact that I would like to see, that I think you all would like to see as well too. I think we have like a lot of lofty ideas, and I want them to come to fruition. But I think it's kind of hard once we realize that we have these expectations that we're not meeting. One thing I can think of is our housing inventory asset tool. It's something that was started before I came on, and what that wanted to do was look for land that was available that met codes, but it's kind of hard to do when you have our region, and within that region, they wanted to make like sort of a GIS map of like preferable zonings that would follow that, but that's kind of hard to do like when Buncombe County's R1 is less dense, but Henderson County's R1 equals more dense zoning. And it's finding that sort of medium just amongst those two counties was a difficult task. And I think that it was a great goal, something they wanted to do, but it was more than they could possibly handle. I think it was a bit of an overreach on that, but I think Land of Sky is equipped and ready to sort of network and bring the right pieces together to make something happen.
I have a question on that last bullet too, marketing the Asheville region to residential development partners. I think your words were we market to luxury. So
Yeah.
what are the recommendations in there to broaden beyond a luxury market?
I don't have any myself, and I know there's none in the study, but I think it's hard to say that when a lot of our population has always been as a sort of tourist destination. Having second homes here, it is sort of that luxury. I don't know what there is we could say to market it as more of for the working man, I guess is the right term. I can't think of any sort of marketing strategy we have beyond that. It's always been Asheville is Asheville because people come here on vacation, tourists, it's a baseball team. Like it's always been Biltmore State, that's here. It's just the playground for the rich. I was told one time that like Asheville is not a place to prosper, but it's where the prosper go to play. It's like that kind of hits it on the head. And I don't know how we could market that any other way to sort of get that sort of feel for lower and more moderate income development.
The strategic plan that we're getting ready to approve as commissioners does have some goals in there around economic development and increasing median wages. I think that's been a huge problem across Buncombe County for years, that our wages lag behind everywhere else in the state. And that makes housing attainment even more challenging. So I think as we look at our strategic plan, that we do have housing goals, but there's broader goals that feed into housing attainment.
Absolutely.
Are there any further questions? Thank you so much, Jacob. We appreciate your time.
Thank you guys. Really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
All right, Jonathan, you have an update, new business on the AHSP revisions.
Yes, so if you recall, back in September, we walked through 7 different administrative changes to the Affordable Housing Service Program guidelines. And I've got those listed here on a summary of revisions. We have all of the slides in this slide deck that we can dive into those in depth if you would like. There is an additional bullet that we have language around. And again, it's more of a clarification for potential applicants and partners. And that has to do with the rent standards for project-based vouchers. So I can take a look at that. And then if we have any other questions on the other items, we can go further. So currently, the AHSP program defines affordability in terms of the rate at which projects can, the rental rate for projects defined by the fair market rents. Specifically, it says that's documented in the fair market rent documentation system. At this point, that has been applied specifically for those fair market rent amounts, but we have a number of projects that have received project-based vouchers. Those are the rental assistance resources made available through the Housing Authority as part of their housing choice voucher. Typically, those rental subsidies are provided to the tenant, and then they can select the unit that they would like to use those vouchers for. The project-based vouchers are assigned by the Housing Authority. Up to 20% of their housing choice vouchers can be used for this purpose, and they are tied to the unit. So a project that we might fund through the county would also contract with Housing Authority and have those project-based vouchers applied to some percentage of their rental units. Within the regulations, the Housing Authority is allowed to increase the value of those project-based vouchers above fair market rent. So it can go up to 120% of that fair market rent. And a lot of our projects that receive project-based vouchers base their income model, their revenue stream on those increased rent amounts. So for previous projects, that flexibility has been allowed, recognizing that the Housing Authority is allowed to increase those project-based voucher rent amounts, and those are applied to that project. So when it came to compliance with rent limits, the county has honored those project-based voucher amounts. So the language that staff have recommended is just a clarification that those rent standards established by the Housing Authority would be acceptable within the Affordable Housing Service Program. So that would be the one additional change from the recommended revisions that you all reviewed 2 meetings ago. And I'm happy to back up and take a look at that list again. And if there are any questions about any of the other items, happy to review those.
Are there any questions for Jonathan? Do you need us to make a motion?
Yes,
Make a
so
motion to approve
the
the-
request would be Skip to that slide.
There it is.
Can you help me understand what it means to say that, that funds can't be used for property acquisition, et cetera, but that they should be reflected in the total project budget and what the reason for that is?
So the purpose of include, I'll work backwards from it, the calculation of the total project budget. We want to see what the total project cost and the value of that project once complete would be, and how the county's investment fits into that strategy. The limitation on using county funds for acquisition costs would be to curb the potential for a project to make an acquisition and then not be able to complete that project and for the county to be in an awkward financial position in a project that is unable to.
How about other soft costs though? Like doing your due diligence on to see if a project pencils or not.
Again, the idea would be to reduce the county's exposure to those early planning costs that might be more speculative in nature.
Are there any further questions? We've found the motion. If not,
Yeah, I'm happy to.
we have.
I'll move to recommend approval of revisions to the AHSP guidelines to the full board of county commissioners.
Do I have a second? Second. Thank you, Megan. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion is approved. Okay, we have any announcements, Jonathan?
None from the staff?
None from us. Our next meeting will be December 2nd.
Right.
Commissioner Sloan will be chairing that for us. And if there are no further items of business, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Parker. Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned, y'all. Thanks.
Yeah, you do. Oh, yeah.
For all of 40 minutes.
That was fun.
Yeah.
Don't forget to vote.